I used to believe my life with Daniel was unshakable. We had been together for nearly 6 years, a length of time that had transformed fiery passion into steady comfort. Our friends admired us, often referring to us as the couple who had it all figured out. We shared a modest but warm apartment, a network of mutual friends, and a rhythm to our days that felt as dependable as the sunrise. In many ways, we were the picture of stability, two men who had built a quiet life together, rooted in loyalty and routine. Yet, beneath that image of perfection, there was an ache I could not name. Daniel was everything a partner should be: responsible, hardworking, gentle in his manner. He managed a demanding job that consumed most of his energy. At night, he came home exhausted, collapsing onto the couch with his laptop still balanced on his knees. I would sit beside him trying to share stories of my day, but his replies often came distracted, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he believed our love was strong enough to survive neglect. For years, it did, until it didn't. I began to notice the silence between us. At dinner, we spoke more about bills and groceries than dreams or desires. His kisses had grown habitual, a soft peck before bed, as if we were maintaining a ritual rather than expressing need. I craved something more, something that reminded me of who we once were, back when love felt like discovery rather than obligation. Still, I told myself this was normal. Every long-term couple eventually settles into routine, don't they? I tried to quiet the restlessness, reminding myself of the security Daniel provided. He loved me in his way, steady and unwavering, like a stone wall shielding me from the storms of the world. But even stone walls cast shadows, and in those shadows, loneliness crept in. The loneliness grew sharper during weekends. Daniel often brought work home, retreating into spreadsheets while I scrolled aimlessly through my phone. I wanted to shake him, to demand that he look at me and remember who we were. But each time I tried, guilt stopped me. He was working hard for our future. Who was I to complain about being overlooked? And so I smiled, swallowed my discontent, and convinced myself that patience was love. But love without passion leaves a void. One evening, as I was washing the dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. The person staring back looked tired, not from physical labor, but from emotional neglect. I whispered to myself, "Is this all we are now?" The thought frightened me. I didn't want to resent Daniel, but I couldn't deny the truth. A piece of me was drifting away from him, carried by the current of unmet needs. I remember one night in particular, lying beside him in bed. He was asleep. Almost instantly, his breathing steady, his body turned away from mine. I reached out, placed my hand on his shoulder, and waited for him to stir to acknowledge me. He didn't. I pulled my hand back, staring at the ceiling, feeling invisible in my own relationship. That was the moment I realized how fragile even the strongest bonds could be. I did not set out to betray him. The thought of infidelity never crossed my mind as something I was capable of. I prided myself on being loyal, on being the kind of partner who endured difficult seasons. But the truth is, loneliness has a way of loosening convictions. It does not break you all at once. It erodes you slowly until the boundaries you swore you'd never cross feel less like walls and more like doors left slightly ajar. Looking back, I see the signs clearly. The way I lingered too long in conversations with strangers, savoring the rare feeling of being truly seen. The way I started going out alone more often, telling myself I just needed fresh air. Each small step seemed harmless on its own, but together they were leading me somewhere I didn't yet recognize. At the time, I thought I still had control. I believed Daniel and I would find our way back to each other, that our quiet routines would somehow reignite into passion once more. But deep down, I was waiting for a moment, for a spark, for something to remind me that I was alive. And when that spark came, it arrived without warning, in the form of a single night that would change everything. It began on an evening I hadn't planned. I had been restless all week, carrying the weight of a silence that seemed to grow louder with each passing day at home. Daniel was once again buried in his work, hunched over his laptop, eyes narrowed at spreadsheets that seemed to matter more than the space between us. When a friend texted me about a small gathering at a bar downtown, I hesitated. Normally, I would have declined, preferring the safety of our apartment. But that night, I felt suffocated. I told Daniel I'd be out for a few hours. He barely looked up, simply murmuring, "Have fun." The bar was crowded but warm, buzzing with music and laughter. For the first time in weeks, I felt surrounded by life, by energy that wasn't dulled by routine. I found myself loosening up, engaging in light conversation with people I barely knew. And then I saw him, Adrian. I had met him once before at a mutual friend's birthday party, a brief encounter marked only by polite introductions. But here, under the dim golden lights and the thrum of music, his presence felt amplified. He was charming without trying, his smile quick and genuine, his gaze steady and unflinching. When he recognized me, his face lit up in a way that made me feel chosen. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice carrying above the noise, but somehow sounding meant just for me. I returned the smile, surprised at how natural it felt. I needed a break from everything. "You know how it is." He nodded knowingly, and from that moment, we fell into conversation that seemed to drown out the crowd around us. He asked questions, real ones, not just the casual small talk I had grown accustomed to. And when I spoke, he listened, eyes locked on mine, as though every word mattered. It was disarming, intoxicating. I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. Time slipped by unnoticed. The drinks in my hand were more an accessory than a necessity. The real intoxication came from the closeness that developed between us. His laughter was unrestrained, his touch casual, yet deliberate when his hand brushed my arm during a story. Each gesture carried a subtle electricity that made my skin hum with awareness. I told myself it was harmless, that I was simply enjoying attention, basking in the reminder that I was still desirable, still alive. But the boundary between harmless and dangerous blurred quickly. When he leaned in to be heard over the music, his face close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath, my pulse quickened. A voice inside me whispered to step back, to remember Daniel waiting at home. But another voice, louder and hungrier, urged me to stay. We left the bar together, laughter echoing behind us, the cool night air sharp against my skin. He suggested a walk, and I agreed without hesitation. The streets were quiet, the city alive but distant, as if the world had folded in on itself and left just the two of us. Our shoulders brushed, and neither of us moved away. At a corner beneath a flickering streetlight, the silence between us grew heavy, charged. He looked at me, searching for permission, and I didn't stop him. His lips met mine in a kiss that was both tender and desperate, a collision of longing and restraint breaking. I kissed him back, and in that instant, the dam I had built within myself finally shattered. The night blurred after that, a sequence of moments strung together by touch, whispers, and the rush of doing what I swore I never would. Each embrace was laced with guilt, yet the guilt was drowned by the raw, undeniable thrill of being wanted. For the first time in years, I felt chosen, alive, reckless. Later, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling in the dim light of his apartment. Adrian slept soundly, unaware of the storm unraveling in my chest. I thought of Daniel, his steady breathing at home, his trust, his quiet loyalty, and the enormity of what I had done crushed me. My chest ached with conflicting truths. I loved him, and yet I had betrayed him. I told myself it was just one night, a mistake born of loneliness, something I could bury deep enough that it would never surface. But as I lay awake, guilt heavy and unrelenting, I knew that wasn't true. One night had already changed everything, and the weight of it would follow me home. The morning after was cruel in its simplicity. I woke up in Adrian's apartment, the light cutting through half-drawn blinds, laying stripes across tangled sheets. He stirred beside me, peaceful, as though what had happened was natural, inevitable. For him, perhaps it was. For me, it was the beginning of something I could not undo. I slipped quietly from the bed, dressed without a word, and left with a knot in my stomach that tightened with every step toward home. The air outside was brisk, biting against my skin, but no cold could temper the heat of shame burning through me. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. Daniel asking when I'd be back. 3 simple words, typed without suspicion, filled me with dread. How could I look him in the eye knowing where I'd been, knowing what I had done? When I returned, Daniel was in the kitchen, half awake, coffee mug in hand. He greeted me with his usual softness, unaware of the invisible distance I had carried through the door. I kissed his cheek, a gesture that once felt natural but now felt like a lie pressed against the skin. He smiled, unknowing, and went back to his routine. I wanted to confess right then, to rip away the mask before it hardened. Instead, I swallowed the truth, and the silence between us grew heavier. Days passed, but I was no longer the same. My laughter with Daniel sounded hollow, my words rehearsed. Guilt lingered in every glance, in every small touch. At night, lying beside him, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down like a stone. He reached for me, and though I responded, there was a fracture beneath the surface, a secret wall he could not see, but I could not ignore. Daniel began to notice. He asked if I was tired, if something was wrong. His questions were laced with concern, not accusation. That was worse. His trust made the deception unbearable. I offered half answers, stress, work, exhaustion, anything to keep him from guessing the truth. But the more I lied, the more I eroded the very foundation of what we had built together. Adrian lingered in my mind. It wasn't love, not in any true sense, but it was temptation replaying itself like a dangerous song I couldn't stop humming. I thought of his laughter, the way he looked at me as though I mattered entirely. Those memories were intoxicating, yet they poisoned me further. They didn't fill the void, they deepened it. What had seemed like a spark of life now revealed itself as fire, one that consumed rather than warmed. The breaking point came one evening when Daniel looked at me across the dinner table, his fork paused midway, his eyes searching mine. "You're different," he said softly. "You're here, but you're not with me. Tell me what's going on." The words caught in my throat. I saw the man who had stood by me for years, who had carried me through storms and celebrated my small victories, staring with quiet desperation. In that moment, I hated myself. I hated the cowardice that kept me from speaking, the betrayal that had carved a wound between us. My silence was its own confession. Daniel pushed his plate aside, his jaw tight. He didn't accuse me, didn't demand answers. He simply said, "Whatever it is, I just need you to be honest." His voice trembled, not with anger, but with hurt. That tremor broke me more than shouting ever could. I wanted to tell him everything, to beg for forgiveness, but the words refused to come. Instead, I sat there, drowning in the realization that the person I loved most no longer truly knew me. And worse, I no longer knew how to bring us back. That night, lying beside him, I felt the distance like a canyon. His breathing was steady, his trust still intact, and mine was the secret that poisoned it. I understood then that infidelity isn't just about the act. It's about the silence it breeds afterward, the invisible walls it raises, the way it rewrites love into something fragile and uncertain. I don't know if Daniel and I will survive this. Perhaps the truth will surface, perhaps it will destroy us, or perhaps it will force us to rebuild from the wreckage. What I do know is that one night, one choice altered the course of everything we were. And every time I look at him now, I am reminded, it only takes a single night to change a life, forever. Weeks turned into months, but the night with Adrian did not fade into memory. Instead, it lingered like a shadow stretching over every part of my life. I woke each morning with Daniel beside me, his trust intact, his love steady, and yet every glance felt like a reminder of what I had stolen from us. My betrayal had become a second heartbeat, steady and relentless, pulsing beneath the surface of our daily lives. Daniel, perceptive as always, sensed the shift. He never confronted me outright, but the questions in his eyes grew sharper. "Are you happy?" he asked one evening as we sat on the balcony, city lights scattered beneath us. His tone was casual, but his grip on the railing betrayed unease. I answered quickly, too quickly with a forced smile, "Of course." The lie tasted bitter. The truth was that happiness had become complicated. I still loved Daniel deeply, but that love was tangled with guilt and fear. I feared losing him, but I also feared admitting how far I had already lost myself. At night, lying awake while he slept, I replayed the choices that had led me here, wondering if I had sabotaged the very thing I needed most. Adrian, meanwhile, drifted in and out of my thoughts like a ghost. I never sought him out again, but his memory remained, his laughter, his attention, the dangerous thrill he embodied. He represented a version of myself that I both longed for and despised. Reckless, selfish, hungry. I told myself I would never see him again, but the damage had already been done. The betrayal was permanent, regardless of whether it repeated. Daniel's patience began to wear thin. He noticed my silences, my distracted gaze. One night, after another strained dinner, he said softly, "It feels like you're somewhere else. Like I'm losing you without knowing why." His voice cracked, and in that moment I realized the cruelty of my secrecy. I wasn't just betraying him with my body, I was betraying him with my silence, forcing him to question himself when the fault lay entirely with me. I considered confessing. Many nights, I rehearsed the words in my mind. I made a mistake. I hurt you. I'm sorry. But every time, fear stopped me. Fear of breaking him, fear of shattering the life we had built, fear of watching him walk away. And so I clung to silence, even as it eroded what little intimacy we had left. The distance between us became undeniable. Our routines continued. Shared meals, shared bed, shared life, but the warmth was fading. We touched less, spoke less. We became two figures moving through the same space, but carrying different truths. He believed in us. I carried the secret that threatened to undo us. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Daniel turned to me with tears in his eyes. "I don't need perfection," he said quietly. "I just need honesty. I just need you." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside me. For a fleeting second, I almost confessed, almost laid everything bare. But the words caught in my throat, heavy with the weight of consequences I wasn't ready to face. I simply took his hand instead, squeezing it as though the gesture could bridge the canyon my silence had carved. In that moment, I realized the true punishment of infidelity is not discovery, it is the prison of living with what you've done. Every smile feels counterfeit, every touch borrowed, every moment haunted by the question of when the truth will surface. As I looked at Daniel, I wondered if this was the beginning of the end or the fragile start of something else, a reckoning that might one day bring either forgiveness or finality. All I knew was that the night with Adrian had rewritten the course of our love, and no amount of silence could return us to who we once were. And so I sat there hand in hand with the man I loved, trapped between confession and concealment, knowing the choice I made next would define the rest of our story.